Well, good evening. It's really a special evening for me, and His Eminence and dignitaries, it's really a great honor for me to have you all here. And allow me to begin my speech by expressing gratitude toward Istanbul Armenians Associations for creating such a beautiful award to honor the memory of Professor Dadrian and to keep his legacy alive. Needless to say, it's a great honor for me to be the first recipient of this award, not only for its symbolism, but its profound meaning for me personally. If I'm here, standing before you today and receiving this award, it is because of one person, and one person alone, Akcam Dadrian. Were it not for Dadrian, I would most likely neither have studied the Armenian genocide nor have come to the United States, but this isn't the half of it. I spoke previously about Professor Dadrian at an event held in his honor at the Ararat Eskijian Museum. At the risk of repeating some of the same thing, I would like to speak tonight about how and when I got to know Dadrian and to emphasize just how much support he gave me over the years. And I will end my talk with some observation on the state of the art of the Armenian genocide research and what lays ahead in its possible future. We start off in year 1990, the year that Dadrian and I first became acquainted. I had decided to work on the Armenian genocide, but the institute at which I was then working declined my request to do so on the ground that they simply didn't know enough about the topic to judge its relevance. Nevertheless, they made the following offer. They would suspend their final decision for now, and if I could put together a workshop and invite some experts on the subject, then on the basis of the debates and discussions that transpired there, they would make a final decision. But who were these experts and where could I find them? I contacted Professor Petra Kappert from Hamburg University. She handed me 2 articles by Akcam Dadrian and urged me to read them. I remember one of the titles was the Naim Andonian Documents on the World War I Destruction of the Ottoman Armenians. At that time, I could not speak English and was not able to read the article, but in scanning them, I saw many Turkish sources cited. This guy knows Turkish, I thought, and I should find out where he is and write him a letter. So, although I then nurtured relatively little hope that something substantial would come out of it, possibly not even a response, I nevertheless sat down and penned a letter explaining my ideas and intended research. To my surprise, I received a letter in Turkish that began with the following sentence. Bu benim 40 yıl sonraki ilk Türkçe korrespondantımdır. This is my first correspondence in Turkish since I left Turkey 40 years ago. This letter would represent the beginning of both our friendship and working relationship, or if you will, our master-apprentice relationship. He came to Hamburg and owing to his passionate engagement, my project was approved, Dadrian serving as its advisor. In those days, I would already use the word genocide, but like most Turks, I was nevertheless under a certain amount of psychological pressure from the Turkish government's denialist policies. I was not entirely sure of myself, and I wanted answers for the hundreds of questions that plagued me in order to ensure that I didn't write or say anything incorrect. And Dadrian was there, patiently, answering every one of my questions and sending me photocopies of the sources on which these answers were based. But there were so many questions that at one point his passion nearly exhausted. He wrote a brief note on one of the faxes saying, hopefully the questions have come to an end. İnşallah senin soruların bitmiştir. Dadrian was not only the founder of the field of Armenian genocide research, he was also one of the founding intellects of the field, comparative genocide studies. There were many qualities that Dadrian had set him apart from most of other scholars and which allowed him to pioneer this field of research. His expertise was not limited to history of sociology, but also extended to international law. Another distinctive character of Dadrian was his elegant and precise command of 5 languages: German, French, English, Ottoman and modern Turkish, and few words of his mother tongue, Armenian. He was indeed a great scholar, but his heart always beat for his own people. I cannot recount how many times he told me that he frequently could not sleep at nights. In his dreams, he would see the heads of children dashed against the rocks, their bodies dismembered, and he would be awakened by their screams. In his work, Hakan Dadrian possessed the rare combination of an objective, analytical eye of a scholar with a never-ending search for justice for those who had perished and for their descendants. I believe that it was this guiding principle that produces his greatness both as a scholar and as a human being. When Michael Hagopian made his first highly acclaimed documentary on the Armenian genocide in 1975, he called it the Forgotten Genocide. Since then, decades have passed and hundreds of publications in a variety of languages have been printed on the subject. It can now be said that Armenian genocide has taken its rightful important place within the field of genocide studies. It is a forgotten genocide no more. And for this, we have the pioneering researchers of this field to thank, Hakan Dadrian first and foremost among them. The academic of that era, thank you. The academics of that era weren't just combating a large and powerful state, Turkey, that had mobilized all of its resources in a campaign against them. They were engaged in an enormous battle against the silence and indifference of academic world at that time. Even in the United States, most historians of late Ottoman period have avoided the forced deportation, expulsions, massacres, and genocide that took place during the demise of the empire. This event has been non-existent in their works. What is more, the broaching of the subject has generally been dismissed as a disturbing expression of narrow-minded ethnocentrism by members of the targeted ethnic groups. Richard Tovanesian several times told me how difficult for him was to get a chair in the yearly annual meeting of the Middle Eastern Study Associations. Middle East Studies Association, the umbrella organization for these scholars, it was really very difficult to find a place for Armenian genocide scholarship. And it was as if ignoring mass deportation and annihilation were an academic virtue and a noble act. Since Armenian genocide scholars of early period were preoccupied with gaining acceptance on 2 different fronts, their main focus of their studies was the question, what really happened? And their aim was to show it was genocide. This is why one can observe and feel through their works a deep well of anxiety and tension in trying to prove something. I liken them to first Armenian who struggled against the gigantic armored men of the despotic Babylonian king Bel, who, according to Armenian mythology, demanded that they see him as a god and give him unquestioned obedience. And Dadrian was the Armenian's hike, the mythical founder of the Armenian kingdom under the shadow of Mount Ararat, who in this story shot the arrow that prized the Bel's armor. Just as Hayek and his follower succeeded in somehow establishing the Armenian kingdom, the early scholars of the genocide under Dadrian's leadership succeeded in somehow remaining the word of the Armenian genocide and establishing it as a legitimate subject for study. In subsequent years, the Armenian genocide has taken its rightful place within the field of genocide studies. Naturally, we cannot have expected either Dadrian or Richard Hovhannisyan or other pioneers of this field to answer all the questions concerning the genocide. The immense pressure under which they operated simply in order to prove what happened has led to two significant academic weaknesses in their field, in this field. The first was the neglect, even conscious avoidance by many scholars of the Armenian sources in their work, no doubt in an effort to avoid accusations of being swayed by biased sources. Even though that they used selected Armenian sources, they tended to approach them with an excess of caution. Dadrian told me dozens of times that, quote, if I were to use the Armenian sources, they would tell me all Armenians and their sources are biased towards Turks. And since you are one of them, Armenian, what you write based on Armenian sources has no academic credibility. I am therefore, he told me, obliged to prove the truth of the genocide by means of the perpetrator's own sources. End quote. Second, so first is the negligence of Armenian sources. Second, the first researchers and Dadrian chief among them worked as hard as they could liken the events in the Ottoman Empire to the Nazi Holocaust, the gold standard of genocide, if you will so, and so as to give their claim great credibility. At that time, the Holocaust occupied, and still today occupies, a central place in genocide research and became the yardstick in the entire genocide field, which an event might or might not measure up a genocide. It was a sine qua non. At the time, everyone researching instances of mass violences other than Holocaust spent enormous amount of energy trying to prove that the events they were studying shared similarities with Holocaust so as to strengthen their cases. Especially given the Turkish Republic's denialist stance, the question of whether or not the 1948 Genocide Convention definition could appropriately be applied to the event of 1915 became the lodestone for all debates. The fear that event of 1915 would not be considered genocide if they did not sufficiently resemble the Holocaust, and then the genocide scholar, they did a conscious effort to ignore all the differences that naturally would arise between Armenian genocide and the Holocaust. To give just one example, even though the forced religious conversion and assimilation of Armenian boys and girls was one of the structural components of Armenian genocide, this element had until recently never been focus of any serious effort at scholarly research. Today, we can happily say that we have moved from the fledgling period of genocide research. Academics working in our field today have branched out and grown more confident in line with the way genocide research have developed in general. The emerging young scholars have produced series of valuable works through the extensive usage of Armenian language materials. Once overlooked or avoided, the oral and written testimonies of survivors one of the most important sources for genocide research, are now studied intensively and comprehensively. And the new generation of scholars has shown the confidence to abandon the impulse to try and liken the Armenian genocide to the Holocaust. My purpose here is not to summarize in a few minutes Dadrian's and others early genocide scholars' merit and contribution and the lacuna that remained for us. During his acceptance speech upon receiving the Adorno Prize in 1977, the Jewish German sociologist Norbert Elias stated that he bears a torch lit well before he arrived, and that there will be others coming after him to carry it into the future. Dadrian was not only the principal bearer of the torch during the time, he was one of those who first lit it. And the task which falls to us today is to pick up the torch and to carry it as far and wide as we are able before one day passing it on the next generation. We must ask ourselves, are we up for this task? I cannot say with any assurance. I would like to paint you this evening a positive picture of current state of Armenian genocide research, but I am unable to do so. It is true that in recent years, significant new publications have appeared and that American universities and in the field genocide research in general, the Armenian genocide has now been accepted as an established fact. It is also true that my recent publication, for example, Killing Orders, proving the authenticity of the cables from the Ottoman Interior Minister Talat Pasha, ordering the annihilation of the Armenians, something the successive Turkish governments have claimed to be Armenian forgeries, has been a serious blow to the denialist policies. Over the decades, Turkish government and its allies have loudly boasted that there were simply no Ottoman governmental document showing an intentional program of genocide. And just last month, I published an article featuring some new Ottoman documents that show without a doubt, maybe it's to your surprise also, without a doubt that the first genocidal decision to exterminate Armenians, albeit of a local character, were taken already at the December 1st, 1914, according to an Ottoman document. In many aspects, this early decision resembles the initial extermination of Jewish males and at the hands of Nazis Einsatzgruppen in the summer of 1941. Even so, we must be honestly acknowledge just how extensive the denialist machine that confronts us is. Facing this immense industry, as Professor Dadrian once called it, is the field of Armenian genocide research, one which is largely dependent upon the efforts of a handful of individuals. And it has only been through the self-sacrifice and dogged devotion of these individuals that any work in this field being produced at all. It is a harsh truth, but one that needs to be spoken out. The future, such an immense field of potential research, is almost wholly dependent upon the efforts of a few individuals. Each of one of these individuals is thus a bright star in an otherwise black night. But they are eternal, and each time their light is extinguished, they leave another hole in the vast expanses of ignorance, one that it is not certain to be filled. One thing should be very clear for all of us. You cannot defeat a large, well-funded industry through individual efforts alone. A number of desperate individuals cannot prevail against an entire state-sponsored industry of denialist machinery. Dear friends, if we are sincere and serious in our struggle for recognition of the Armenian genocide, in our demands that the Turkish government finally acknowledge the Armenian genocide, we should keep one thing in mind. You cannot win the political war leaving it only to certain individuals. In the end, all of these individuals, they might be like big shining stars. They will pass away and their light eventually fades with them. Dadrian, one of those stars of the Armenian people, but since there was no academic institution house him to refract his light, it is in danger of fading to the point of being extinguished. And the concern and the lack thereof to his passing would seem to serve a warning sign. I sincerely hope that I am mistaken. Dear friend, the field of Armenian genocide research must be institutionalized. Here is the bitter pill. There is not a single Armenian Genocide Research Institute centered in all of North America. If we compare with the Holocaust research, for which there are around 250 such centers in American universities, it is a grim picture indeed. I know my Armenian friends, you often complain about the dominance of the Holocaust in the field of genocide research, even though you know that the reason for this state of affairs is the investment that Jewish people have made in genocide research and education. My Armenian friends and colleagues continue to bemoan the vast disparity instead of doing something about it. I admit I find this situation puzzling and more than little frustrating. Merely evoking the abstract notion of justice and the truth in support of our cause would have little effect, since our adversaries lay claim to the same language. Indeed, the practice is one of the principal characteristics of denialism. The denialism developed their own alternative facts and truth. In such a situation, the claim that we are the claimant to truth and justice simply becomes an echo of your opponent's claim. They will say the same. And after all, no one declares his or herself to be an advocate of injustice. Denialism can thus only be effectively fought if there is an institution with the vision, organizational ability, and funding to engage in a protracted struggle to advance in viewpoint and to regularly and systematically produce knowledge. The institutionalization of Armenian genocide research, an essential and critical next step if there are serious concerns among Armenians for the recognition of Armenian genocide. Without first winning the fight for knowledge, you cannot win the political and judicial legal struggle. Knowledge is the power. If the recognition of the genocide is still an important issue for the Armenians, the war will first have been fought and won in the area of knowledge and information. For failing to gain control over knowledge makes it well nigh impossible to achieve a political victory. I'm well aware that the fact denialism cannot be defeated through the efforts of academic scholarship alone. Denialism must be defeated politically. It is only in the area, the politique, the battle will be determined. Even so, if you don't armed with knowledge, you cannot carry the fight on. Knowledge is the most important ammunition of the political and judicial fight, and we currently lack the institution that can more readily supply such ammunition. No enduring political and legal victories can be won so long as we fail to recognize the power of knowledge, and having recognized its power, laying the foundation for its institutionalization. We must honestly face up to this reality. Merely repeating that one is on the side of justice of history doesn't help much. Again, individuals and individual stars shine and then fade. What is essential is the institution. If we wish to honor Hakan Dadrian, to truly keep his memory alive, if we want his light continue to brighten our path, it is our tasks, yours and mine, to institutionalize the field of Armenian genocide research. We have to create institutions that carry the legacy of Dadrian. Only in this way we will be able to successfully facilitate and preserve research on Armenian genocide. This is actually what Dadrian all about. I call upon you here and today to this crucial, important task. Let us devote our time, energy, and our financial sources to the creation of a long overdue Armenian Genocide Research Center. This is the most appropriate way to honor Dadrian's memory. I thank you for honoring me with this award. May I prove myself worthy of it and of Hakan Dadrian's legacy. Thank you very much.
Just to rest a little bit. Thank you very much. I mean, you clearly were, without opposition, our first choice for the inaugural award. So I think your speech justifies why. And yes, I urge everyone to join you in that request.